Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first devlog of Nightmare World. Now, while a lot of you know what Nightmare World is, quite a lot of you still don't. So I'm going to give you a very quick rundown. Nightmare World spawned out of everyone's disgust for people running to Kickstarter to raise millions with nothing but an idea for an MMO, and a bunch of asset store assets jumbled into one big mess. After that, I assembled a team of very passionate developers, artists, and story writers. Together, we're setting out to build an indie MMO with the features that we want to see, starting with a budget of 0. We will continue to develop with a budget of 0 until we have something to show, which, funnily enough, the project has caught so much attention already that we've already had investment offers from people, which is absolutely ridiculous to say the least, considering how little we've already shown. People are trying to back the game, not based on the game, but based on the team of people that are already behind it, which, for me, is an incredible confidence boost that we've picked the right people. With all that said and done, Nightmare World is not going to be your typical kind of development log. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, we're going to show game development in its entirety, in the sense that we will show you all the pitfalls that we run into, and all of our successes. We will not shy away from topics such as budgeting when it comes to it. A lot of development logs paint a pretty picture of game development. You won't be seeing any of that here. That also means you won't see any Callum creating meals for some reason in the middle of a development log, and you also won't see me going to do exercise. I don't know why that's become part of a development log trope, but that's what that is. But yeah, you won't be seeing that from me. So, what is Nightmare World? Let's start with the theme. The working title of the genre is Industrial Dark Fantasy. It has high fantasy elements, including magic and alchemy, technology levels between Industrial Revolution and light steampunk. The clothing is based after early European era Victorian, with fantasy and steampunk elements, but not strictly gendered like Victorian clothing. Weapons are mostly medieval fantasy with a light Victorian and steampunk influence. Bows and crossbows are going to be more common in the world, but flintlock pistols and early riflings do still exist. So, let's start with the patch notes. What have we done in the last 2 weeks, or week and a half? Well, we started with absolute 0, and we've now worked our way up to a persistent, database-driven MMO. Is it complete? Absolutely not, but let's have a look at what we did. First of all, me and Daz started on some of our basic systems. Daz began by developing the building system, and I began by developing the forging system. These two systems are going to play a very big part in the game to come, so it was important to us to get these off the ground first, as a lot of other systems are going to be built around these. Daz started to tackle the building system. For our building system, we took inspiration from a lot of other games that use building, such as Fortnite, Ark, Rust, and Conan Exiles. All of these have building systems that have fantastic elements, but they all have their flaws. We wanted to combine the best of all of them and try and come up with a building system that would completely satisfy everything that we wanted from it. Over the last week and a half, Daz has iterated on the building system pretty much non-stop, and we're now at a point where I feel that it's the most consistent building system that I have ever used. It's incredibly predictable, the snapping is beautiful, and the variety of kit pieces that we have as a template actually allow you to build some pretty creative buildings. The building system works phenomenally on multiplayer, and we've had no issues yet. While Daz was doing all that, I began work on the forging system. Now, the forging system is something that a lot of people have asked about. Essentially, it's a modular weaponsmithing system. This will allow you to create swords that look exactly how you want, have exactly the sort of stats that you want, and it allows you to show off all the cool pieces and patterns that you've earned and learned along the way. This system has been set up with rule sets and checks in place to allow people to make weapons of different types, and also this means us adding a new type of weapon or new parts to an existing weapon is incredibly easy, which means it gives us a lot of scope to reward players. Currently this system only works with short swords, long swords, pole arms and scimitars. However, we're currently in the process of adding battle axes, warhammers and many others. To give an example, if you use a longer handle, you've got better accuracy, but you now have to use it as a two-handed weapon. If you use a blade tip that has a sharper edge, it's going to have a better slash bonus. If you have one with a more serrated edge, it's going to have better stab bonus. That's just an example though. Some weapon parts will have the ability to increase bleed damage and other elements, meaning you can truly make some incredible builds with these weapons. The last big milestone for the development team was actually getting this project up and running on OWS. Now, OWS is what we're using for our persistence layer, and by persistence layer I mean our database-driven gameplay, so that when the servers shut down and reopen, everything's still there, including players' buildings, their health, items. This obviously sounds like a must-have for an MMO, but it is something that a lot of people overlook. A lot of people set up Unreal's multiplayer and completely forget about saving people's data. Thanks to OWS, that's saved us a lot of trouble. By using OWS's backend API, we've got level persistence, player persistence, and account creation. When jumping into setting up OWS, we were actually quite worried about it because it seemed like a very big undertaking. However, Anyday, our ultimate hackerman and our third developer on the team, was an absolute trooper and sat there for the last 2 days getting this set up, and I can happily say we are up and running with database-driven gameplay. Anyday is definitely a team member that we couldn't have done this without. He's also learning Unreal Engine blueprints and replication, so that he can also be of assistance with me and Daz. So next up, our lore and story writing team. Hajinim started work on the general approach to our starting area. He worked closely with Rotsu and Kitten and all the other artists. They also put together a rough outline for quests, interactions, and in regards to players needing to learn. So tutorials for skills such as mining, crafting, building, alchemy, cooking. What we're aiming to work towards early on is what's called a vertical slice. An example of all styles of gameplay put into a small area, where you can go through and test out all the features in an early access. Last but not least, we're going to take a look at what the art team has been doing. In just a week, the art team has been working hard to hammer out core concepts and assets for NightmareWorld. We now have a concept art for the city hub and the first biome of the wild areas, and many assets from those concepts have already gone into modelling. This is where our 3 new artists come into play. After only a week on the project, we decided that the developers were getting way too far ahead of the artists and we needed more. This is where Chris, Miles and Seif come into play. These are the 3 new artists that we took on. Chris is doing some phenomenal concept art and modelling. Miles and Seif are both doing modelling. Having these on board already has massively helped us push forward, as we now have the artists needed to fulfill the needs of the developers that were steamrolling ahead. Our city hub will be constructed by our artists using the building system we've created. This is part of the reason that the building system is so important. This will allow us to generate an entire industrial city with our own handmade assets, in a way that feels natural to build. At this point, you can see that we've got our first wall kit. We wanted to quickly throw together a wall kit that wasn't a white test box, so that we could actually get a feel for the parts that we were putting together. Meanwhile, outside the city, our tutorial zone will be constructed from more organic models, in the style of our first biome, the Enchanted Forest. This region will be home to many shroomish creatures and ferocious beasts, such as the first race that you'll see, the Sporid. Along with the overall world, our artists have also been working on the smaller things, such as crafting tables, raw materials, and even the UI elements. Here's some of the work that Chris, Glowstick, and Grim have done. The UI in the bottom right has been done by Grim, and I can't wait to get that into the game, as it actually is set up with, I believe it's called 9 slicing, which allows us to scale this UI without it warping or deforming, which is essential really, as we're going to be doing quite a lot of that. Finally, the art project that has been worked on the hardest would be the character creation kit. While it isn't finished, we already have models present for male, female, androgynous body types, and at least half a dozen hairstyles with more concepted and awaiting modelling, and so much more. We plan to allow for some very in-depth character customization that will even expand further as the player gets deeper into the game. That's a system that we'll reveal at a later date, but it's going to play a huge part. Unfortunately, that's all that we have for this devlog. We have a lot of systems that are still in development, and in fact near completion. We can't wait to show them off in next month's devlog. The plan is that at the start of every month we'll release a devlog. This one was never planned from the beginning, so the order of things that I've shown you aren't precisely in the order they were done. However, going forward, I'm going to be documenting each day of development that takes place. If you want to see more of this project and have questions, we're going live on Twitch right now. Last week we had some problems with OBS and it conflicting with full screen Unreal Engine. That has since been fixed and we're going to be there all night answering any questions and showing off things that we're working on. This goes from an art perspective, code perspective and story perspective. Once again, a massive, massive thank you to our patrons. So many of you signed up after last week's video. You're allowing us to create this kind of content, and more to the point, you're allowing me to put time aside to work on Nightmare World aside from YouTube. I feel that this is only the beginning of a brilliant journey for both me and the team, and I can't wait to share what comes next.